Hello, I'm David Ellenstein, Artistic Director at North Coast Repertory Theater. Thank you for joining us today for Theater Conversations. If you enjoy watching these, please click like, subscribe, and share. It's free to do, and it helps us get more visibility for these videos. Thank you. It's my great pleasure today to welcome my friend, Jeff Moss, to our Theater Conversations. Jeff Moss is an amazingly accomplished and skilled director in the American theater, and we're going to talk about that. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, David.
How are things in New York?
Things in New York are getting better.
Good.
We're
Good,
getting
good
better.
to hear.
I'm happy to say our numbers are under control. We're all doing what we're supposed to do. We're following the director. We're doing our blocking the way we're supposed to. We're wearing our costumes the way we're supposed to. And so far, so good.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So Jeff, we're going to talk about all of your directing exploits over the last 25, 30 years. But before we do, just because a lot of our audience doesn't know you at all personally, other than the fact that you directed our wonderful production of Spitfire Grill, and you directed our great production of the Sunshine Boys, and the first thing you did was the workshop of Rothschild and Sons, which you also were one of the reimaginers. You and Arnold Middleman and Sheldon Harnick and Sherman Yellen reimagined that show into a new form. And then we did it first here at North Coast as a workshop. You then directed it in New York. You then directed it in London and all that. So that's how our audience would know you. But you know, you have a vast career all over the place. But how did you get started in this crazy business?
My Aunt Lorette.
I beg your pardon?
My Aunt Lorette. My Aunt Lorette, who was my dad's aunt, but we weren't allowed to say anything like that. We were never allowed to say where she was in the age category. I grew up with stories that my Aunt Lorette told me about how she discovered Ethel Merman. And whenever we got together, family got together, that's what she talked about. She was Miss Show Business. She was one of the first women personal managers. And I actually have a picture from the late 20s of a group of girls standing in front of a bus. One of them is Ethel Merman.
Wow.
My aunt's in the picture. She was a personal manager.
Wow. So
I grew up in those stories, and she eventually got us tickets to see Broadway shows. And the first Broadway show I ever saw was Happy Hunting with Ethel Merman. And
so did you meet Ethel Merman?
Many years later.
And did she talk about your aunt?
Yes, she did. I was at a book signing. She had written a book, and I asked her to sign a copy to my Aunt Lorette, and asked her if she remembered her. And there was this moment of silence, and she said, "Her? Oh yeah, I remember." So evidently there was some connection there. I'm not sure exactly how it landed, but it was there. Yeah.
Yeah, she discovered me.
Yes. I think a lot of people claim they discovered Merman. Right. Lorette said it was on one of her dates, one of her jobs. She had booked her on a job.
So were you originally going to be an actor, or what was your first foray into the business?
In third grade, I played a troll.
You played
a troll.
A troll under a bridge.
Yeah, troll under a bridge. Yeah. Exactly right. I was very successful, I was told. I went on to plays in high school. I played Billy Bigelow. We were sold out. I got good reviews. My parents liked it. I went off to Penn State University with the idea of being in the theater. I wasn't quite sure where. And when I left Penn State, I was a scenic designer. I had spent almost 3 years studying scenic and costume design. And that's how I started in the business. And I did that for several years. I was a designer both in regional. I did a couple of Broadway shows. I did TV. And while I was doing that, I began to direct.
So how did that happen? How did it transition from scenic design to directing?
one day I said to myself, if that guy can do that, I think I can do it better. And I don't have to be so dirty. I don't have to do all that painting. And for a while, I did both things. I was, trying to make a living, and I was designing and directing, and eventually I let the designing fall away.
So as a director with a design background, how did that impact you in dealing with designers?
Why don't you call Marty? Yes. Well,
I actually don't. I mean, you did it. Yes. By the time you got to us, you'd been, you'd done so many shows. I meant early on when you first made that transition.
Well, it was good for me because I did, and I still do, see the show very clearly on the stage. I mean, I know what I want it to look like, or at least feel like. And what it's done, it's moved me to work with directors who I know are much better designers than I ever was or will be. So they can take my idea, my vision, which is just my vision, and make it better and turn it around. And I love it when they come back to me that day and say, what about this? And then I can say, yes. Oh, I thought it was going to be purple. No, you're right. It shouldn't be purple. It should be blue, right?
Yes, the purple discussion.
Yeah, the purple discussion. I mean, I always think I'm right.
That's funny. So you became you transitioned into being a director, and you ended up getting to direct not only all over this country, but maybe talk a little bit about, and I want to come back to the shows you've done in this country, but talk a little bit about the venture that you have that takes you to Asia often.
Well, it's a very odd story. I was busy directing shows here, and as it turns out, I have directed a lot of national companies. I've directed and produced a lot of national companies. I love to hire myself. It means I have work. And I wear two hats. And one day, our agent brought somebody to rehearsal, an Asian gentleman who said he was interested in doing our show, which was My Fair Lady, in Asia. And we got the rights, and he was going to, this was like in September, we were rehearsing a national tour that was about to open and tour through the States. And he would like it when the show was finished to take it to Singapore in May. That sounded great to me. I looked on the map to see where Singapore was. I did all of those things. It was fine. The show went out. The show was successful. It was on tour. It was at Christmas. Did you hear from that guy? We never heard from that guy again. In January, we got, I think it was a telex, it was before faxes, from a man in Singapore whose name did not mean anything to us, saying that he had booked the show. He had it booked in the theater. And could I send him all the information? I guess this guy that had come to see us had sold the shows off and had walked away. And the guy in Singapore was left with a week of My Fair Lady that he had paid somebody for. It was all not quite legit. But we eventually worked out a deal with him, but we said, look, you need to do 3 weeks for us to be able to afford to go. He did indeed. He booked us in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Malaysia. And we toured those 3 cities. That My Fair Lady was the very first Broadway show that ever went to Thailand. It was the very first Broadway show that ever went to Malaysia. And that opened up a partnership where we took the national tours that we were doing in the States and toured them to Asia with this company, this man who who loved the theater and had worked out a network of Southeast Asian cities that would take English language Broadway shows.
And so how many shows have you sent over there at this point?
20, 25, maybe 30.
Wow.
I lost count.
Wow.
Things that you would expect, My Fair Lady, which we have since recently actually taken to mainland China, the first professional production of My Fair Lady ever in China.
With a friend of ours playing Eliza Doolittle.
Yes, with Aurora playing Eliza Doolittle. Right?
Aurora, who was in Spitfire Grill, those of you who may remember. Right. She played Eliza over in China.
Right, to great acclaim in both things, right?
Right.
And things like Ain't Misbehavin', Peter Pan, 42nd Street, just all kinds of gold standard American musicals. And they like it, they love it. And very interesting to be there.
I bet. I can only imagine what a eye-opening education that must be.
Yeah, and it's a great thing to say to the companies, look, guys, this is what we do best. We do this better than anybody else in the world. We know how to do this. This really represents who we are in the theater. That's what we're doing here. And that makes those opening nights really special. In all of those countries, those people are there. They understand what they're seeing. They like what they're seeing, and they appreciate it in a way that's just different from any place else.
Yeah, yeah. So
and that's very rewarding.
So the other show that you did for us was Sunshine Boys, and I always love people to know that that wasn't your first Sunshine Boys.
It was not.
Your first Sunshine Boys had a couple of little-known actors in it.
A man by the name of Mickey Rooney and a man by the name of Donald O'Connor.
Oh, that's right. Them,
right. And it came to be because I thought it was a good idea. They were doing an act together. Where they each came out and did a little bit of their own, one-man acts, and then they joined together at the end. And it seemed like such a good idea. What I didn't know was they didn't like each other. Barely spoke to each other, and neither of them wanted to be on the show on stage with the other one for the whole night. So there were a lot of negotiations involved, but eventually we got it on. It was a very successful tour.
That's great. So you and I met because of our friend Arnold Middleman,
yes,
who had hired me a couple of times and you many times to direct down at the Coconut Grove Playhouse,
right,
where you got to do all kinds of great show. When you think about Coconut Grove Playhouse and I don't know, what did you do? 10 shows down there, maybe more?
More, yeah.
Which ones jump out at you and you go, that was like the height, that was so great, that was so fun? And who were the people that were in it with you when you were working on it?
Well, there were a lot of great shows there, and the reason there were so many great shows there for me is the same reason why the experience at North Coast and U has been so great, because I felt safe working there. I felt protected. I felt that my work was respected, and that everything that was needed to make the show happen was in that room, and that we were all telling the same story. And to me, that's so important. So there were a lot of great shows there. Our production of No Way to Treat a Lady,
yeah,
which was with Lenny Wolpe, who was recently in the Sunshine Boys. That's not the first time I'd worked with Lenny, but one of the times we had worked together. And also the Rothschilds, upon which Rothschild Sons is based.
Right. So you did the full-out Rothschilds at Coconut Grove.
Yes,
okay.
We did.
I didn't remember that.
Yes, with Lenny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Lenny was in it. I didn't.
Yes.
Gosh.
Yeah. And that's how I got to know that piece. It's good things, and the issues I had with the structure of it at that point. And actually, during that production, I reached out to Sherman Yellen, the original book writer, about some issues, and he and I, in a correspondence, and with permission from him, did a little bit of tweaking in what was the second act of that show. And eventually, that many years later, when Arnold and I began to talk about the show, rethinking it, revisiting it, that it was all based on that.
Right. And I think it's fun to note that, we did the workshop at North Coast Rep when it was still being developed, and Sheldon Harnick came out, and
yes,
and you and Arnold were there. But then when the show went to New York, 3 of the people that were in the workshop at North Coast Rep actually went and did it off Broadway with you.
Indeed.
Nicholas Monjardo Cooper, Mark Pinter, and our own associate artistic director, Christopher Williams, who played a major role, played the son Nathan, who's kind of the third part in the show.
A huge, important part of that show. And all 3 of those actors probably remember the most embarrassing moment I've ever had in the American theater. And you were part of that.
You mean in our rehearsal room?
Yes. I guess I could tell the story.
Sure you can.
Sheldon and I have laughed about this. So there we were.
Sorry. So those of you that don't know, Sheldon Harnick was the lyricist and on the Rothschilds, but he's also the co-author of Fiddler on the Roof, Fiorello, so many well-known musicals.
Right. He's the Harnick, Bock and Harnick.
And Sheldon is still with us, and he is
96. He just turned 96. Yes, I just spoke to him.
I shorted him 3 years there.
Right. And there we were doing this workshop. And the reason Arnold wanted to do it in San Diego, not only because you had given us this wonderful opportunity, but we thought it was away from the New York guys and the New York eyes. We would be protected. We could do our work. And indeed we did. And at the end of the week, Sheldon was coming to see it because although he had given us permission to do the workshop, had not given us permission yet to go further than that. This was the test. So I was on my very best behavior, and so was everybody else. Sheldon got there, and I didn't know Sheldon that very well. We had done some work with Sherman on several occasions. We had done rewriting. He had rewritten lyrics. He was very cooperative, but I don't know that he was actually on board yet in any way. And so we got through this read-through that we were doing for him, and we got to the very first song called One Room. And in the course of that song, the two people singing it turned away from each other. I don't remember the details too much. I think I blocked them out. But the guy turned away from Gudula, the character. And Sheldon, in the middle of this singing, when you were in the room, stopped, jumped up and said, "No, I can't have it like that. You can't do something like that. You're ruining this song." He just went off. And it was one of those moments, and I remember thinking to myself, well, Self, you have one of two choices here. One, you can jump up and scream back at him, or two, you can do something else. And the something else was, I turned to the stage manager and said, "Let's take a break."
Right. I remember this well.
Right. And then that seemed to be a good idea.
Everybody
filed out of the room, and that left Sheldon and I very privately to iron out any differences that we had. And in a very animated conversation, as I remember, I was facing Sheldon. He broke the ice with a very funny story, and about how he had been in a rehearsal once and spoke up, and the producer said to him, "Thank God, a lyricist who actually speaks his mind."
Yeah.
And we went on to talk about this issue, and we solved it. What I didn't realize was that this rehearsal room was originally a storefront, and the entire wall behind me was glass.
Right.
And the entire company was up against the wall, watching and trying to listen as best as they could. So,
there are now curtains across those windows.
I've seen that since then because I left.
I just wanted to say, because I grew up with a father in the theater who was very vociferous himself and did not hold his opinions back. When Sheldon did that in the middle of the rehearsal, it didn't seem abnormal to me. It seemed like a passionate theater person going too far with expressing himself, and maybe not at the most appropriate time. But sometimes it takes those passions colliding to come up with the best answer.
No question about it.
And you guys, and as you say, you worked it out, and it took him doing that to bring that to the forefront and then get past it. Not that that's ideal for everybody or that works in all situations, but sometimes those kind of explosions can have great creative things come out of them. It's not always the most fun to go through, and I don't recommend it as the normal process, but sometimes it's okay. And when someone's passionate and creative and feels so strongly about something and they can't contain themselves, there's something to really pay attention to there.
Oh, that's the essence of Sheldon. That's the essence of what, and from there we were on a year's journey to the New York show, and that's what I dealt with, that passion, all in a positive way. And I think that moment, Sheldon, as you said, realized he had gone too far, but he he immediately, he didn't apologize, but he immediately told this funny story to kind of justify what he had done and to begin to explain to me just what you said. Look, I'm very passionate about this, and this is why I feel this way. And it's actually a moment in the show that we still are not, he and I still don't agree on, and he knows it. But it is, that collaboration has been extraordinary. Just with Sherman and Sheldon has been extraordinary.
Right. Well, and you know, I don't know Sherman, but Sheldon, you know, he's also such a sweet, smart, beyond experienced person, and you know, such just to get to work with him is an amazing thing, right?
Yes. I must say I've been very lucky in my career to have worked with several people that have had that kind of experience and passion that's driven them. And I see it in their work.
Who else comes to your mind when you say that?
Charles Strouse.
Okay.
I've done many shows with, has that kind of passion. It's reserved in the way he collaborates, but he will stand firm when he needs to. And he and I have done so many things together, and we've done things where he has not only written music, but he's also written lyrics. When we did the revision of Golden Boy, he wrote the new songs because Lee Adams didn't care to do it. And Charles wrote lyrics as well. And that was because I knew where the passion was, and he just needed to be encouraged to get there.
Yeah.
He's like that. Cy Coleman was like that. Cy Coleman would get up in the middle of a rehearsal, go over to the musical directors, go and say, stop playing, you don't play this right. Move him away, sit down and play the song. I remember when we were doing Little Me, and when Cy Coleman played that song, it sounded like nothing else you'd ever heard.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So you think about, you've done so many of the tours of the big shows.
Yeah.
What was the most fun? Which one was the most fun that you just went, this is just like a dream?
The show that does that for me every time, and I've done it many times, but I'm hoping to do it once again, is My Fair Lady.
Oh, interesting.
There's something about
I thought you were going to say Guys and Dolls, but you said My Fair Lady.
I love Guys and Dolls. I love doing it. My Fair Lady has something about it for me. Every time I do it, it's so rich. There's something else to discover. And new actors bring, as you know, a new actor to a new piece brings just another, I see things I haven't seen before.
That's great.
Lessons. Yeah, I love that show.
So you've done, you know, I don't know how many productions you've done in your life, countless at this point. Why do you keep wanting to do it? What still turns you on? Aside from the fact that you get a paycheck, what turns you on about doing what we do?
Trying to see if I'm going to be better this time.
I love that.
Honestly, that's, as I get older, I'm trying to be better than I was the last time. I'm trying to be.
How can you be better? Jeff, how can you be better?
I learned to be a better listener. I try to be a better communicator with actors. Am I saying things that they get? You know, actors listen to directors, but am I saying something they really hear? Am I saying something that's going to help them? Is when we do the scene again, is it better? Is it better because of something I said, an idea I said I had, or because the actor did something and I said to him, yes, let's have that color, more of green than we had of yellow. Am I being clear? You know, I think the director's job is about seeing the whole show.
Yep.
I'm more convinced of that as I go through life and through my career, as the big picture is so important. And it's made up of so many little things.
Yeah.
Can I tell you my Brigadoon story?
Of course.
Okay. So this is one of my favorite opening night stories. I tell this a lot. It was the opening night of Brigadoon, which, as you know, was a musical in the 40s, written by Lerner and Loewe before they wrote My Fair Lady. And it was the opening night of the very first production in Boston. The very first opening night, the producer, Cheryl Crawford, was standing in the back. She was watching the show. It was the end of the first act. The end of the first act takes place in front of a beautiful Oliver Smith drop of a room of a church. And there was a corps de ballet who were dancing. There was a chorus singing. And there was a dancer by the name of James Mitchell doing the sword dance. He was a famous dancer. The sword, it was Agnes DeMille, became a very famous part of the show. It was all going perfectly. And then the drop that was behind all of this rose up into the fly gallery for no reason, revealing 8 or 10 mortified stagehands who were standing around. But James Mitchell kept dancing, didn't miss a step. The singers were singing, the dancers were singing. And 8 measures later, the McLaren interior came back down, came down behind. Now they were dancing in an interior. But nobody missed a step. Nobody stopped. And all of a sudden, that process reversed itself. The interior went out and the exterior came in. And Cheryl Crawford, the producer, thought her life was over. She figured this was the end of everything. She didn't know what to do. She ran out the door. She ran down the street, in the alley, back right to the backstage door. She went almost on right to the wing. And standing in the wings was Stanley Simmons, the costume designer. And she said to him, Stanley, did you see that? Did you see that? He said, I certainly did. James Mitchell wore the wrong socks 2 days in a row. Eventually I say, okay, guys, check your socks. I have to see the whole thing. I have to make sure that the whole show makes sense. I have to make sure that the beginning and the middle and the end are all in one place.
And we know because he wore the wrong socks, that show never had a future.
Yeah, it's correct, right? And the last time I did bring it to him, I gave socks as opening night presents because I didn't know what else to get.
I love that.
Yeah, but that's, for me, that's what it's about.
Well, Jeff, this was great. I know that the North Coast audience is going to love to hear these stories and to get to know you a little bit. They've gotten to see your work a couple of times. Hopefully they will again soon. And it's great for you to share this stuff. And who knows, maybe there's an Irma La Douce in our future somewhere. I was listening to it again the other day. We were talking about Irma La Douce, and it's a forgotten musical at this point. It is. But the music is those songs are great.
Score is great. It's very sweet.
And the music is so uplifting too.
Yeah.
The story has a few problems in our day and age.
Yes, it does.
But
a little rock and roll for us, I think. We have to rock and roll a little bit.
Well, I hope to see you in the very near future in person once we're allowed to do that. And
nothing could be better.
It's great to see you at least this way.
Thank you, David. My love to everybody.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.